Welcome everybody. You know what we're here for. We've got Liz Rice here, who's done deep thinking and writing about this cultural identity question that is germane to all of us, right? So I'm glad you're all here, and our intention is to have this be a really good gathering and time to share and learn from each other and all kinds of good things. So Liz has a little bit prepared to kind of set the stage, bring some initial observations to all of us. And so Liz, I'm gonna make sure that I think we're in speaker view. Yep. Liz, you can go for it, and then we'll discuss as we desire after that. You're
Great. Thanks, Kelly. It's so great to see you all, as it always is for me. It's very healing just to see the names pop up and the faces and the people I love and know so well. And as I was thinking about this talk, which was meant to be a panel discussion in person, I really felt like, I was able to tell my story through my book and at the last reunion. And I felt like that really today is about, and maybe at the next reunion, is finding healing through sharing our stories and exploring our journeys. I think it's a real testament to the enduring strength and the love of our beloved community that, in fact, here we are from all over the world logging in to be together just for a short time. And I really wish I had Zoom in my 20s. Many of you were with us 3 years ago at Juneolesco when I read from my memoir about growing up in Korea and about the sense of deep loss I felt trying to adjust to adult life without the community that from the beginning of my life and your lives surrounded me and made me who I was. I think it's fair to say that what I shared struck a nerve. In fact, it struck a vein. How moving it was when the room opened up for comments and person after person opened their hearts to the struggle and sometimes pain of life after Korea. And it wasn't just TCKs talking. Former missionaries and teachers and parents and other workers who went to Korea as an adult stood up, shared similar stories expressing their story of loss and pain and identity. The question for me and for all of us after those wonderful few days together was, what's next? How can we support one another on this issue as we have on so many other issues? It was clear to me that day that we all needed to share our stories, so here we are today. When I was preparing for the in-person reunion this summer, in which the format was to be the panel discussion, I was tasked with gathering together a number of people to talk about it. And I realized I was having trouble, and I realized I can pick anybody. Anybody in that room, anybody in this Zoom call has something to say about their journey of identity and about leaving Korea and about growing up in Korea and living there. Each of our stories are different, of course, but they share a common thread. For me, I remember I was in my mid-20s going to an SFS reunion somewhere in the US, who knows, Chicago maybe? I was so excited to finally see everyone after years that the agenda of events was kind of irrelevant to me at first, especially during the first hour or two. I was happily looking around the room waving, hi, whispering to Jenny and Debbie, as my SFS teachers may remember I was prone to do. But then I heard this man named Dave Pollock speaking from the front of the room. And what he was saying started to really hit home. He started to describe a third culture kid and the common traits of this third culture kid: a sense of rootlessness, unresolved grief, feelings of being trapped in the past. His words really hit home. I had a name for what I was going through. It was one of the breakthrough moments along my long journey. Some of us fared much better after leaving Korea for different reasons. Others, including me, were TCK poster children. I learned in those hard years that an honest answer to the simple question, where are you from, could be a total conversation stopper. I learned that I did not know who I was without Korea. Marilyn Gardner, a well-known writer in the TC community, grew up in Pakistan and raised her own children in Pakistan and Egypt, and I've been happy to get to know her recently. She recently wrote a blog about the term TCK. She said, I first heard the term earned fact from Catherine Boo, author of Behind the Beautiful Forevers. As an immersive journalist, she talks about being able to write not because she saw something or read something, but because she lived something. In order to write the book, Boo immersed herself in the lives of people in a slum in Mumbai. Daily, she went to the slum, sat with people, recorded their stories, observed and asked questions. She did this for 3 years. When she wrote about the slum, she described the people, the smells, the garbage, and even the air as one who had experienced this world. And Marilyn continues, but the book itself is not the focus of this blog post. Instead, I'm interested in this idea of earned fact and how it relates to the third culture kid conversation. I'm interested because many of the third culture kids I know, myself included, become weary of feeling like we somehow have to justify our experience through education or research. The reality is that we have something that education and research can never give anyone. We have earned fact. We have lived something extraordinary, and our words and stories come from that place. She continues, our earned fact often begins at birth, where the first words we hear are not from our mother tongue. They are words said to us by a midwife, a nurse, or doctor who speak Urdu, Tagalog, I would add Korean. We don't come into our lives as third culture kids with already formed worldviews. Instead, our worldviews are formed by living between. Our identity is shaped through interacting with our parents and their dominant culture and the dominant culture surrounding us. Research on identity formation does not apply in the same way. Instead, we move back and forth as little people whose identity is being forged and shaped between two often conflicting cultures. But that's the end of that quote. So for us in this room who came together because of Korea, our earned facts are too many to count. Boogie coils, wafting bundegi odors, gravel soccer field, blue plastic umbrellas, elegant and multicolored centuries-old palace gates, a serene beach on the west coast of Korea, streets full of life, streets full of labor and poverty and loss. We TCKs and the people that raised us are a community bound by a love that for a country that for many of us was not technically our own, but was our own. The adults are bound by 5, 10, 50, sometimes a 50-year commitment to a place far away where, sorry, I'm letting people in now, far away where their ancestors came from, except for the Underwoods, of course, who came from Korea. We are a community bound by a story of leaving countries on faith or faith to go into places and cultures unknown. For many of us, we also share something else. We understand what it's like to lose an entire community in one day, in one moment. We know what it's like to be a hidden immigrant in places we are told we are home. We understand that people see the tip of our iceberg, but often know so little of what lies beneath the surface. We know what it's like to be in a room of people we feel we really should relate to, but maybe we feel like from another planet. We share some of these things too.
Then I think we could talk.
I just have a few more things to say. Okay. We each have our own story to tell about Korea, our collective history and time together, but ours was a community that would one day exist in a different way. So here we sit on a Zoom call to be together again, to share our stories, to be with people who understand us, to be with people who know our full story. I firmly believe in the importance of recognizing the fullness of our story, and I believe in telling it. We don't need to gloss over the difficult parts. We can name them and claim them, and we claim the abundance of joy too. Oh, what joy. From that place of recognition, find hope and healing.
Okay, there we are.
Kelly will now open our discussion and a time of reflection on each of our own journeys. And we have some questions that would be helpful to people to reflect. And if you feel compelled to share, that would be wonderful too. So Kelly?
Yeah, so I think it's such an interesting question to try to do this with the technology being this particular platform, right? As opposed to being in a room together. If we were in the room together, you'd be raising your hand and we'd be running a microphone to you. And so I think to me, it seemed like maybe the best way to make this work is if you've got something to share, just type into the chat box, with your name or with a sentence saying like, hey, I've got, I'll take the mic or whatever. And then we'll call on you in that order, because it just, I think, will be too chaotic if all our mics are open and somebody starts to try to talk and we talk over each other, that type of thing. So it's a shame to have to do things in this sort of stilted way, but it's the best we can manage, I think, under the circumstances. So as Liz was saying, we have this, I think we all have this deep sense of gratitude for this rich aspect of our identities. And then it's also been a source of of struggle and pain and discovery for all of us, right? The processing has not always been joyful. The processing, I think, for lots of us has been difficult sometimes. So Liz gave me some kind of structure to talk about things, and I'm going to keep trying to watch the chat if there are comments you want to share. So just as in a general overview, here's some things to think about. There's issues that touched us all, right? So we all re-entered some culture, and for some of us, it's been more than one re-entry or one transition. For you adults, you entered from your country of origin to a new country, Korea, and maybe even others at various points in your life, right? And then if you retired back to your original home country, you had another transition there, another re-entry. For some of us, we had re-entry only in one direction, like somebody like me was born in Korea. And so my first moments of, let's call it discomfort and self-awareness of like, oh, wait, what exactly am I in terms of my identity and my cultural connections? You know, that happened as a little child, first entering the States on a few visits, but then most dramatically as I went to college. So the stages for us have been different. The contexts for us have been different. The ages these things have happened to us have been different. The amount of autonomy we've had in those transitions has been different, right? As adults, if you chose to go to be a missionary or a teacher, as opposed to a child who got hauled along, right? Hauled along maybe once for Liz, right? Hauled around one direction, hauled around along the other direction. So it's interesting how these variables are different for lots of us, but the common theme obviously is the same, is who am I? And what am I emotionally connected to, right? That's part of the deep truth for all of us. So we have already people ready to talk, and the first one is my brother, and I have confidence that my brother will have meaningful and interesting things to say. So I am going towards his microphone now to hit the unmute button. So Mike, as soon as you see that slash disappear,
Yeah.
you're good.
All right. So this is a very short story, but I guarantee you it will be appreciated by many on this conversation. So this is probably about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. I met my dentist. Actually really like my dentist. She's super funny. And she's Vietnamese American, but really she's American. She's never lived in Vietnam, but her heritage would be Vietnamese. And that day, the assistant also helping her is also Vietnamese heritage. So you know how it is when you're in the dentist chair. Number one, it's slightly miserable, but number two, you can't talk when they're doing stuff to you. And eventually your mouth's so full of spit and whatever that they have to stick that little suction tube in there and suck it out, and you get to take a gasp. And if you've wanted to say something, you finally can. So I'm laying there, and while they're working on me, they're having a conversation about something they read about the Korean education system, and essentially how the Korea has a very good education system. And so, of course, I'm just listening to this, can't speak. So when they finally suck that stuff out of my mouth, I actually can say like, well, da-da-da, and I give my comments, which are a moot point in this instance. But they're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, I was born and raised in Korea, until college. And they go back to working on my mouth, and my dentist says, all this time, and we never knew he was one of us. And that gets to the heart of it. That gets right to the heart of it. And the next chance I got to speak, I said, you don't know how good that makes me feel to hear you say that. That's it. That's the story. And you can mute me.
Okay. Liz, you mentioned David Pollock, and I don't remember if he is the author, but the book Strangers at Home, I don't know if anyone else has read that or not. That, I think, for me, was the book that started to help me process this stuff in my own life. So many insights in there that were surprising and then obvious when you saw them. And you know, like random things, even like the idea that apparently it's super likely that kids, third culture kids, have become self-employed. A lot of us become self-employed, and I had no idea that was a statistical likelihood. It totally ended up applying to me. So it's I always am amused when you realize that you've predictably fulfilled something in a category that you know you're in, but you didn't know that these were characteristics that were sort of predefined for you in some ways. Let's see, Tracy, did you have an insight to share? Because I saw you raise your hand, or are you just applauding my brother? All right, she's only applauding. But I know Tracy has thought about this deeply too, because Tracy is my classmate from 6th grade, and we have kept in touch, and I know many good things about Tracy and her good life. So, so let's take some sort of specific questions, right? And I'll just keep my eyes in the box here for, oh, no, Mike, I don't know why you're on screen. Are you on screen? I see primary. So let's talk about some stories of like how you let's say how you recognize that this was an issue, something significant in your life, right? In terms of the by definition it was a fact of our lives. Who can share when and how they actually started to sort of notice or acknowledge, like, oh, this is a thing for me. Like this is a thing. I am looking for people to volunteer to talk. Martha says she's got something to say. So hold on, Martha. I gotta find you. If you can unmute yourself, Martha, do it. And otherwise, I'm hitting your button. Okay. Okay, you're good.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I just, your story, Michael, resonates with me because, you know, for years, I didn't want to tell people I was raised in Korea because it made me feel set apart. And it was always, then I was awkward because they didn't know if I could relate with them or they could relate with me. But as I've grown older, and I now am more willing to share that, because I realize it is a heritage experience that so many people here don't have. And but I was always scared to it. And as I said, for years, it made me feel different. You know, I don't know if people can relate to that, but, and even as a child on furlough, I was scared to tell people, even though they right away said, you know, so there's something different about you. I didn't know. I mean, I looked American, or, you know, but my manners must have been different. And I'm not sure what it was exactly. Maybe my pronunciation. I don't know.
So let's I'm curious. So who else will explain how they, like, did you hide that part of your identity? I'm interested. Is that anybody else sort of self-aware of that? Like, did you choose, let's call it discretion. Did you choose to be discreet about your identity? Kathleen's got something to say about that, or about something else. So Kathleen, I'm searching for your microphone. Oh, looks like there you are. So, all right, go for it.
Great. When I was telling my dad that we were having this conversation, and he said, well, I can't figure out Zoom, so I'm not going to participate. But he was telling me the story of my older brother, Mark. And Mark left, graduated from Seoul Foreign in '74, and went back to the US that summer to start college. And he went to visit my grandparents in a little farm in Ohio. And he's so psyched to tell them everything about Korea and his experience over the last 2 years. And it fell on deaf ears. Like, it could have cared less, or he thought they could care less, and they didn't know how to interact with him. And as a parent, Dad was sharing with me yesterday that he was heartbroken for his son, that he had to send him off into the world and experience this without the support that he had. So that's kind of another perspective on it from the parents who had to let the kids go back into the US.
I'm searching Eleanor. Eleanor has something to share as well. I think your microphone is on its way to becoming clear. All right.
Okay, that is just real short, but sometimes when I've met Korean people, I can really identify with them. And I remember this one man, he was a substitute, and I was hiring substitutes. After he met me for a while, he said, "You're really Korean." He said that to me, and I thought it was a compliment, but I didn't know what he meant because I didn't think I acted Korean. But I know my brother Ben, he sometimes has kind of an Oriental way about him in his mannerism, where he kind of bows a little bit when he sees people, and so he acts a little Korean. Maybe they saw that in me too, but it's just something interesting. You know, I didn't tell people a lot that I was overseas. If it comes up, I'll tell them, but I don't like announce it right away. I don't know.
Debbie Lentz.
Hi, everybody. I went to college, and when I went to college, I had only third grade in the United States. So really all I knew about American culture was from, you know, snippets of television, which wasn't a very good representation, or, you know, really didn't help me understand what it would be like to live in the United States and to identify as an American. I moved to Minnesota, which is very white and Lutheran, you know, just not a lot of diversity at all. And I think the hardest thing for me was realizing they don't know I'm brown underneath, right? They don't know that inside, you know, that's not my real skin. And that's something, but I never really, I always celebrated what was inside, right? Even when I would say, well, I was raised in Korea and all I got was nothing, which always boggled my brain. It was like, don't you even have a single question about what I might have experienced, you know? But I do have a funny, when I was in college, and this was back in the late 70s, and I was just mind boggled by the lack of worldly knowledge or knowledge of the world that people had. So in my very first couple months, I had a friend who I had said, you know, I'm from Korea. And he said, well, really, are your parents Korean? And I just thought, okay, he doesn't know that there are countries in Asia where everybody looks the same. Everybody has the same nationality. Yeah, so just really crazy things that you experience as you realize people's ignorance, right? Or just lack of knowledge of the world and how it works out there. But I wouldn't trade my history for anything. It's only enriched and, you know, deepened who I am. So.
Tracy said she's got a couple of thoughts to share about how, about the issue of sharing or not sharing your identity.
Yeah, I spent 2 years in Seoul. My father worked for initially for a nonprofit aid organization, and so from the age of 2 months, I was living all over Southeast Asia, and I didn't really move back to the States until I was 15. The first story that I don't really know, one of my uncles tells me, is I must have been between the ages of 5 and 7, maybe, and we were on home leave and in LA, and it was really hot. And so one of my cousins picked up the hose to drink some water, and I became utterly hysterical. And I ran looking for an adult, screaming, "She's going to die, she's going to die, she's going to die." And my uncle had to explain to me that you could drink water from the hose in the States without dying. Because that had been drilled into me from a very, very young age. So I was aware that my life was different because, you know, every 2 years I go back to the States, but that was home leave. And it was not until I really moved to the US when I was 18 and a half that I really started grappling with the question of identity. I felt like for the first year, my brain processed information in a different way. I learned that the most innocent questions that my schoolmates would ask. Oh, when we were 10, we went on a vacation to Yosemite. Well, if I learned that if I said when I was 10 and I went on a vacation too, I would get this, oh, or someone asking, oh, I like that sweater. Where did you get it? And if I said I got it in Hong Kong, I would get an, oh. So I learned that I pretty much had to keep it to myself. I was very fortunate my freshman year in college. The college I selected had a special dorm floor for international kids, and it was half US passport holders and half international. So, I mean, that was, for me, that was perfect. I love the term hidden immigrant. I think that really describes the situation, because I found myself wishing that I looked different enough that I could be marked out. Though I also knew that if I looked different enough, there might be some other things coming my way that wouldn't be so pleasant. But I also remember one final little story. The first high school I was at in the States, I overheard a couple girls walking down the hall right in front of me, and I had just come from the Philippines. And one was saying to the other, well, she's American, but she has some Filipino blood in her. And I remember standing there going, no, I'm an American. But that told me that was how my classmates had no point of reference. So I had to become quiet until I became more of an adult and encountered other adults who were able to process things better. But that's my story.
Thanks, Tracy. William Brown has something to share with everybody, and your microphone is in the process of becoming viable. Hold on. Hit that button again. William. Okay, you should be. Hang on. I think we're both hitting at the same time. Hold on, William, let me see. We can't hear you yet. I'm going to hit that button again. See if we can get your mic to work. It looked like it flicked open for a second. All right, you're good. Ooh, the technology thinks you're good, but I'm not hearing you, William. Darn. Okay, shoot. All right, hold on. Let me try that one more time. I still see the red slash.
Want to go back to William? Maybe?
Oh, try, William, can you say just 2 words and let's see if it's working? It's not working. Darn. All right, you want to type something into, just share it. If you can type it into the chat, William, that'd be good. And it looks like I had other volunteers. Hold on one second. Beth has something. Beth, I think you're towards the end of the line here in the stack of people. Let me get to you. All right. Beth, as soon as your microphone is unslashed, you're good to go.
Okay, so a previous story reminded me of an embarrassing story, and the whole theme of the story is embarrassment, but I guess that's just a part of being a third culture kid. I think it was the summer I was 15. We were back in the States for just the summer. Maybe I was 14, I'm not sure. Anyhow, staying just for a couple of weeks in some little town in Illinois, and it was my sister and brother's birthday coming up, and I had a little bit of saved money, and I went down to the dime store, picked out a few things, carefully counted up my money, had exactly the right amount of money, and he said, the total of course came out more because of tax. And I said, what? Tax? What's tax, right? So that was embarrassing. That was enough such that actually for a long time I wouldn't go in stores, except the other thing I noticed in this store was that nobody followed you around. So a little bit later, my one and only experience with shoplifting, I'm acknowledging things here I probably shouldn't in public, was just, there's nobody watching, right? You remember the Korean shops, somebody would follow you around constantly. And I was just curious, right? Could I just slip this in my pocket? And sure enough, I could. Those two together, but for a long time, and I don't know if other people had these experiences, right? Just being embarrassed by the fact that I didn't know something about tax was enough to make me hesitate before going into any new place for a number of years. Right? So I'm appreciative of the other stories that help me remember these things.
Yeah, and that speaks to the truth of this, right? Is that, I mean, self-awareness is a great thing, and sometimes our best path to self-awareness is anecdotes and insights from other people, right? We see ourselves reflected, we see the comparison, we see the contrast. But yeah, that's why it's so great if we all are able to talk with each other about this stuff. Leah, you are up.
Thank you. First time I really remember being aware that I had a different frame of reference than my parents was, I think we were probably maybe I was going to 7th grade and we were going back home on furlough. And we went through customs, and the customs man handed my mom her passport. And my mom was just smiling ear to ear. I said, "What did he say to you?" She said, "He said, welcome home." And my thought was, I'm not home. We're away from home. What is he talking about? And then I realized, oh yeah, for my mom, this is home. And I realized, oh, we come from a different frame of reference from that standpoint. And the other thing about going to college, I was one of those that, you may not believe this of me, but I'm kind of shy to start conversations. And so I found for me, it was easiest to introduce myself as Leah from Korea. Then that got things going easily and people could ask me questions. So I embraced being from Korea at that point.
That's an awesome detail to share. Thanks, Leah. Jim Rathbun, you are in the process of being able to speak. Hold on one second.
Am I on?
You are on.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Nice to see everyone. I'll share a couple of interesting MK funny stories. I remember, of course, coming back, several times. I guess probably 3rd grade, 5th grade was one of those times. But I do remember seeing you're supposed to get some bread from the store. And I went into the grocery store and I went down and I had no idea what kind of bread because there were so many kinds of bread, right? Similarly with the cereal, like I was looking for cornflakes and I was overwhelmed with aisles of different cereals. But one time we were back and Aunt Edna Winchell, you remember Bill and Edna Winchell and the Winchell kids? We were on furlough in Wheaton, Illinois, and in the apartment there at Team's apartment building. And I was in the kitchen washing out my sandwich bag, a baggie, and washing out several of those baggies, plastic baggies. And she said, "Oh, Jim, we don't need to do that anymore. You get a new baggie, And I'm sure we reused our baggies multiple times and reused our paper bag, lunch bag multiple times until it sort of just kind of broke. But anyway, it's actually quite a good idea to reuse them now. But it was kind of funny that she told me that. We also, my brothers and I would talk about, well, at least my mom remembers that I would talk about a missionary sandwich. And that is, you could either have a piece of cheese or you could have a small piece of meat. But you could never have a piece of meat and a piece of cheese on your sandwich. We didn't splurge like that. So anyway, those were kind of funny times. I had a really great experience, and I think maybe Debbie said this too, wouldn't trade it for anything, my experience in Korea. And I think it was providential, even in the times that I was able to come back for 10th grade, and then I went back and graduated 11th and 12th grade and graduated there. And we remember, of course, the great basketball team that Seoul Foreign had, 79 and 80, that I was blessed to be a part of. That was a real great time with Raiders and Krauses and everyone, Joel Holm. Just a wonderful time playing basketball. And we took the Far East tournament, right? 2 years in a row. We were like undefeated. So it was pretty amazing. I was really blessed to be a part of that. But being back there my junior and senior year was really very, very meaningful. And then I came back to Wheaton College. One of the things that really, I think, helped me in my adjustments was that I ended up, after teaching a few years in high school in Texas, I ended up going to Venezuela as a missionary and actually worked at an MK school. So we had all sorts of processing of TCKs, and we had reentry and orientation. And so I was able to process my own experience, even as I helped these MKs to process their experience. So that was that was really quite providential. And even more, I think the frosting on the cake is, some of you who were there 3 years ago, I shared how God has brought me full circle, so that now I'm doing some work in the whole Korea's region. And I mean, I'm traveling back and forth normally, although I haven't been able to be there since February. And I don't know that I'm going to get there. And obviously I was supposed to be there in July and September and so forth. But to really be able to work through radio and all sorts of amazing things to engage those in the North has been very, very exciting, very thrilling for me to kind of have a full circle MK missionary experience. So that's just my experience here, and really God has blessed me. I look back and there's a scripture, I think in the Psalms, that says, indeed my heritage is wonderful for me, and I think that's really true in my case. I look back and I there were certainly hard times, but I look back and see how God made me the person I am, and I certainly have no regrets about that.
I'm guessing that most of us are in agreement that the cross-cultural context of our lives has given us access points, right, to I would say, like, ways to be empathetic, ways to look for texture and complexity in questions, right, in aspects of the world that maybe aren't as easily available to some people with a more limited life experience, in that way at least. I'm curious how much contact with Korea most of us have had. I know, let's see, I'll toss out a couple examples. My folks, when they retired, they actually were able to go back and keep working for stints of a few months at a time for several years. So that was real nice for them. Although I think, honestly, it's not fair because their microphone isn't working, but that let them sort of, let's say, transition in some waves. But I think that wasn't necessarily easier. I'm not sure. I would say for me, sometimes I speak in metaphor. So when I think about transition, I can visualize it in a couple of different shapes. And one would be a straight line, point to point, right? Heading up, heading down, heading flat, whichever way you want to say it. One would be a curvy, wiggly line. One would be a sharp zigzag, and one would be loop-de-loops, right? Sort of, let's say, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think for me, the 2 steps forward, 1 step back thing has been true. I lived in complete denial of the fact that I was, like, desperately homesick through all of college. I was way too proud and stubborn to admit that I was hurting. And then, moved right into my early adult life. And it was a couple years down the road for me that all of a sudden it was like, oh, wow, like something is, like, not okay. And so I've been lucky to go back to Korea a bunch of times, but then each time that's been an interesting sort of re-immersion just as a visitor, to be able to be home and feel all the goodness of that, and even to have, honestly, some really strong experiential aspects of that, stepping off the plane and just having vocabulary words just pop in my head like balloons. It was so bizarre the first time that happened, that completely unexpected phenomenon, right? Triggered by being back in that place. My brain and soul did stuff I didn't know was going to happen. But then every visit going back, then it was a little different, right? Because you're not really, really home. You're just sort of a little bit home for just a little while. So, all right. I know you guys have, speak up. Yes.
I was just going to say, Kelly, I was thinking about each of us and our, say for TCKs, I guess, well, it applies to everybody. I think what we went back to, how we went back, if family was still in Korea, if family left completely, those were really relevant questions to what our journey was like as an adult. For example, for me, I actually did pretty well when I was still in my parents' home my senior year. I was in Oklahoma, which actually I found a place quite welcoming, and there was a big Native American community. There was diversity in a way that I think I fit, because it's strangely enough for me, when moving to New England, to a small, maybe it's not strange, but a small private elite college in New England that was mostly white, was really when I fell apart, because I just didn't know who I was in that environment. I was so a fish out of water in that. And not just that, but a place where a missionary was sort of a weird concept to people. So that's not even a good venue to go. And then Korea, like not a cool country, France, or, so there was no avenue to kind of become who I was. And the international students were from quite wealthy families, and not that was a necessary deterrent, but I had no people, I had no group, no one that could really understand me. And I feel like I've always been a person that get to know people well and easily. And I found it really difficult. And it was, I think from that sort of started a bit of a tailspin in my 20s, which, I've recovered from over processing this, going back to Korea, as you mentioned. The journey back for me, the longest time away was 10 years. And I just felt like I have to go back or I'm going to die. And that was for me a beginning of healing, was going home. And for me, it still feels like home when I go. And then I go every couple of years. 3 years pass and I'm like, okay, I gotta raise some money. I gotta get the miles. But anyway, I do think it's interesting, that question of where we went to, who we were with, and what surrounded us is really important to our adult journey in this.
Tracy had mentioned that she connected to, or was happy to be part of, sort of an international dorm, right? So my version of that story is totally different, but my freshman year of college, I was in a dorm with 45 other freshman girls, and we were in a frat house. The frat house had gotten kicked off campus because of something ridiculous they did. So now you got these 45 freshman year girls, all living together. And one of my big discoveries that I hadn't understood at all was that, wow, up till that point, I thought America was America was America. And it was like, but the New York girl doesn't like the California girl. And all of a sudden I understood, like, oh, there's regional differences in this country. Like, what a ridiculous thing to have not known. And we had been to different states. I just didn't get that until I started living with other contemporary, American women my age. So I'm curious, like, if anybody want to share, like, where you found support, like there's different ways to manage your own self-awareness and self-growth and all of that. So who knows, who has a comment about that? Like, did you find peers, kindred spirits somehow wherever you were, or did you lean on family? Did you send those aerogram letters to people and desperately, like, unload your heart, or did you totally internalize and just try to, like, figure out on your own? Toss in the chat if you got any comment about that, about how you managed this part of your processing your identity.
Looks like Kathy has something to share.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me? I had a little different experience than some of you, because when I came back to the States, my parents still lived in Korea. And I was so lucky to go to Emory University, and the president of Emory at the time was Dr. Laney, who had been a missionary in Korea. And so he had brought a lot of Korean people to Emory. So I was so fortunate to have that culture around me. The first year was really hard. I never went home. I actually went to Oklahoma for Christmas to be with the Rices. I took a Greyhound bus. That was interesting. But so I felt like my transition through those late teen, early 20s was actually not quite as fraught, maybe, because I was able to spend so much time back in Korea. But the funny story I have is this cultural, unawareness of the US. I went to Emory, which was maybe 40-50% Jewish. For whatever reason, it attracted a lot of Jewish people. And my roommate, somebody said to me, "Oh, your roommate is such a Jap." And I thought they were, I was so offended. I was like, I thought they were talking about Japanese people. I had no idea that that was Jewish American princess. So, which also probably isn't great either, but I thought they were talking about Japanese people. Anyway, so that was my, coming to the States and many things like that, but that was fun, one of the funny ones.
So there's a comment from Amy Moore. Amy, do you want to speak? I can find you and unmute you, because she raises an interesting question. I wonder how many of us married international people, or how many of us didn't, for sure. Because that certainly puts a different flavor on the rest of your life, right? Is how much somebody else can understand that part of you. Amy, I'm looking for you. If you can unmute yourself, go ahead.
I think it makes a huge difference to have someone else in your life. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That you can have someone else in your life that understands exactly what you've experienced, even if it was from the other side of the world, where my husband was from. And that's been true all through the years. And so I think just that, having met him right after college, so I probably didn't go through, I mean, I had a lot of the same things other people did, but not the kind of deep sense of loss or not being understood. I was also the youngest of 5, so that when I came back to the States, my siblings were already here, and I could, go on vacations, school vacations with them, and they'd already been through it to some degree. Whereas my husband was the oldest and had a very different experience.
Edie, I'm wondering if you want to share something, because it's interesting. I think for a lot of us, the ages that we are, we know how different the world is now, right? From when we were little kids, and then from when we were transitioning back into the States in college age. And I mean, I reference those blue aerogram letters, right? Now communication can be instantaneous and all, and it seems like that would make this issue not a big deal anymore, except I believe that is not true from what I have heard. So, and I'm not sure, I'm looking, is Edie still on with us?
Yep.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, so you want to share?
Hey guys. I just say good morning, everybody. It's great to see all of you, and thank you, Kelly, and everybody who made this happen. Well, I guess I'm a little bit of an anomaly because I'm still here in Korea. So it is a very strange thing, I know. And I always introduce myself as an anomaly at Seoul Foreign School, but I think it's really different I've seen a lot of people come back here, and it's very different than just being able to have contact, to actually be here and to walk on the soil here and to hear the language and smell the smells and all the different things that you remember that come alive when you come here. And I just remember a couple, maybe it was last year, that Debbie Dignan came back, if you remember the Dignans, and some other people came together to have a visit, and it was so emotional for them to be here. And just, every place they went, every step they took had another memory. And of course, whenever people visit, we give them a tour of Seoul Foreign School, which looks like a totally different town, but it still has a lot of the memories there for everyone who comes. And a lot of people ask me why I would stay here, because a lot of the teachers who come to Seoul Foreign School, which is where I am, a lot of the teachers think, they go from country to country every 2 or 3 years, and they can't understand at all why I would ever stay in Korea. And I always find that really interesting, how to respond to that. But one of the things that comes to my mind is, obviously I have a relationship with Korea that would be really hard to understand if you were going from country to country every 2 years to teach in another school. And that relationship has layers and depth and roots that would be very hard to describe. But the other part of it too is that since when I came, I think we came in 1961 or 62, but in that time, I have never seen so much change. You can imagine the amount of change that's here. And so I'm never bored. I'm never disinterested. One time I was in a subway and I was with a teacher who had been here for 3 years. And I said, are you going to be staying in Korea? And he goes, no. I've done Korea. And I started crying. And he was like, are you okay? And I said, I didn't say anything. There's nothing to say in that kind of situation, but I've been here my whole life. And I still would never, ever be able to say, I've done Korea,
A whole different interpretation of the relationship with a place, right?
Yes. Yes. And by the way, I just want to say, there's always something new to discover here. And so, I want to encourage all of you to come back and visit anytime. And for as long as I'm here, we're so happy to show you around and help you. I remember Karen Bernard came with her family and she had a 14-page itinerary she typed up. She's something else. And they just had a great trip with their family. But if you guys ever come, we're so happy to help and give you ideas about where to go. That's one of the things I love to do. And so, and also what to see. Not that you would need that, by the way, Liz Rice, you do not need that. But I'm just saying that there's always something new to discover. And on my Facebook, I try to put all the things I'm discovering. So if you want to be friends with me on Facebook, you can see some of these places.
I am quite sure that we all enjoy vicariously getting Korea exposure through you and your pictures on Facebook, Edie. It really, it's a fantastic, beautiful thing. So, which random segue. So I'm just curious if anybody else feels this way. When someone posts pictures of Korea, and especially of Taechon Beach, I have an immediate, visceral, full soul response to that. I cannot even put into words how a photo of that place especially will just completely stop me and in paralysis of emotion, let's say, for a couple of seconds all the time. So I am guessing that's not just me, that may apply to a bunch of you as well. Let's see. I'm looking for more stories or more comments at all, if you'd like. If anybody's got anything else they'd like to share. How about related to jobs? Anybody? Okay, Mark Rice has got something. All right, Mark, try to unmute yourself there.
Sure. Hey everyone, it's great to be here. I'm glad Liz reminded me 2 days ago. Otherwise, I'd have missed the whole thing. It does feel it's so strangely familiar to see this group of people as opposed to anyone else in my entire life from when I've been born until now. There's no other feeling like it, which just really says something. I'm just thinking about my journey a little bit. When we first came to Korea, I was 3.5, and my parents put me into a Korean school for 2 years of kindergarten, Iwa Yuchiwon, which was over at the Iwa Women's University. And I was the only foreigner there. I was the only American kid with all the Korean kids for 2 years. And that was sort of that became my normal when we first moved there. And then my mother had wanted me to keep me in Korean school, but some of the older guard missionaries counseled against it, saying that they didn't think that I would get into a good American university if I didn't go to the Seoul Foreign School, which probably would not have been the case. But anyways, so I went just back to Seoul Foreign School. And I remember when I arrived at Seoul Foreign School, I didn't like it because I was very culturally attuned to the Korean school at that point. And I remember my first reaction was, everyone here's so disorganized. And they're all just sitting around the teacher for a story, like sitting however they want, you know? And because we were so used to being in our little rows, and we never were like really moved anywhere room to room without going in like a whole pack or a line or every game. There's no like playground where you just go play like on a playground, like now you do anything. It was like everyone's in a circle and you know, everything was like super communal. And I think I had a real reaction. I didn't really like it at first. So I almost had like this cultural change coming to Seoul Foreign School from a Korean school. And then, you know, of course, Seoul Foreign School is such a wonderful place. I had, you know, I mean, incredible. I would never regret my childhood. It was extremely happy, and I felt very secure in our community that we had there. But when I left, like my sister, I actually went back to the same school, to Middlebury College in Vermont, which was the sort of Northeast school, like a kind of a prep school, you know, prep style school. And actually my father had gone there and my grandfather. And so it would naturally be, I think people were perceiving me as I am like this person that's an insider at this school when I showed up. And there was like a lunch or party for people whose parents had gone to school, and I went. But I remember feeling like I have nothing to do with this place. Like it's nothing about it is familiar. The people aren't familiar. I'm a total outsider. And it was a very odd feeling because I was sort of being treated and like I look like I'm supposed to be this thing they think I am, but I'm actually like this Korean guy that's here that looks like this Middlebury College alumni kid, you know. And so I think that was always there was that part of me that was very hard to define, like who am I at that point. I did really embrace being at Middlebury and embrace being in the US. It wasn't until I went back to Korea 18 years later on a trip that my brother and sister had planned to take, that I kind of went at the last minute. And when I went, I was really overwhelmed by how, as Edie was saying, that incredible familiarity that just came rushing back at me. The sounds, the cicadas, the smells, the breeze, everything came really rushing at me. And I had this incredible feeling of almost like euphoria. And I was like, is this how I always used to feel here? Like I haven't had that feeling since I left. Like it all like came rushing back to me. And I said, how have I just been kind of ignoring this for 18 years? I've almost like shut it out. I think my brain kind of shut it out rather than like, oh, I'm going to deal with this and who am I? I was just like, okay, that's over, was my way of dealing with it. So, and then the other thing I was going to say was that I always find now I can go to almost any foreign country in the world. Like I can arrive in, say, Istanbul, where I've never been before, and I feel like, oh, I'm very at home here. More than I am in the US. Like I'm like, Istanbul, oh yeah, I could live here. This seems fine. I feel very at home here. More than I would if I go to Chicago, you know, and it's still that way. So thanks.
I wish I could remember the name. There was a movie like 10, 12 years ago where part of the whole theme of the movie was the sense of disorientation when someone went to, and I think they were in Japan, and I watched it with my husband, and he told me, he said, oh my gosh, that's so kind of conveys what it felt like to me to visit Korea with you for the first time, especially. And that was so interesting to me because I was totally oblivious to that, right? So I get what you're saying, Mark. Yeah, that's awesome. Kim, I see that your hand is raised, and I'm not sure if you meant to or not, but I'm hitting the ask to unmute button for you. If you have something to share.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been really, really encouraging listening to. You had asked the question about returning to Korea, and I grew up actually in South Korea. I was born in Japan, but grew up in South Korea. So all my life beginning years was in Asia. And I came back to the States when I was 14. And I can identify with everything that people are sharing here. But I wanted to share because you had asked about returning to Korea. I'm actually going back to Korea this Wednesday. And it's been 40 years. And I'm going back, and I believe I'm going to be back there to live there for a long time. I've got a job there, and I have really just mixed feelings. I can't even put it into words. I don't even know how to describe it. I think that's why I connected with this group and wanted to listen to all the stories, because I just have such mixed feelings about it. I'm excited, but yet I'm very just mixed feelings. I think there's been a lot of things that weren't resolved when I left. It was a very hard time to leave Korea. I left under bad circumstances with my family. And then coming to the States, it was a real culture shock. And so I think it's like, I almost feel like I'm going back. And I'm a Christian, so I feel like the Lord is leading me back to face my ghosts. And I just wanted to share that whatever needs to be resolved in my life, I really believe the Lord is leading me back for that purpose, because I would not choose to go back to Korea. Personally, I would not do that, but I just feel that there's a purpose for all of this. So I just wanted to share that.
Wow. Well, we will be thinking of you on Wednesday, Kim. And
thank you.
I would add, Kim, that can you guys hear me?
Yes.
When it had been 10 years before I went back to Korea, I like I said before, I felt like I was going to die if I didn't go home. But I'm telling you, those 3 weeks before I went, man, I was just a ball of nerves. It was like every emotion and all the grief that I'd been carrying around was just right here waiting.
Wow.
And so I know how you feel, and it's not necessarily a good feeling, but it's anticipation of knowing that it's an emotional thing you're going to do. And I think it's great you're doing it. And I remember literally, it was my 1996, I think it was, and the plane coming down, and I started to see Korea, and I just spontaneously, I just cried. I was like, there it is. There's my home. There's home.
Wow.
And really those tears were like a beginning of healing for me. That was the healing.
Yes.
It was feel the
Yes.
grief. Know this place, claim it as your home if that's how you feel about it.
Wow.
So I encourage you that what you're feeling is normal, and you'll get through it.
Thank you. Thank you.
well, and I wonder if maybe that's just the right note to end on, is we can all think of Kim as she travels back across the other side of the world in just a few days. And tomorrow we're going to have more time of just sort of intended as anecdotes, but certainly the anecdotes and stories can pertain to this stuff about our identities and how we've managed the cultural dimension and complexity in our lives. Also tomorrow, if we feel like it, I think there's some interest in people saying like, hey, this is sort of a little recap of, what happened in my life after I exited, or where I am now in my job or my family. Any random updates that people are willing to share will be, I think, enjoyed and welcomed in tomorrow's afternoon's gathering. And in addition, I have a little set of kind of amusing quizzes that I will take. We will do a poll on various questions that I think you will all enjoy. So I'll tease you with that for tomorrow. But and right now we have someone landing right now. Dallas just landed in the group just as we were getting ready to close. Does anyone else want to share another story before we exit, or does that feel like a good conclusion to our time together? Liz, you want to finish off with some other thoughts or remarks, or?
Just to say, I'm really thankful for all of you. And again, talk about balm for the soul. Korea is one, and you guys are the biggest part of that, of the people that were there with me. And so, like Mark said, I take such encouragement from just seeing you and hearing your voices. And my book was about a lot of loss and pain, but boy, you only get loss and pain when you have deep joy. And those years in Korea were full of such deep joy for so many reasons, including you all. So it's been a real joy for me to be part of this today. And I would love to continue this hopefully in person next year if COVID cooperates. And would love, if anyone has ideas and wants to participate with me, I would love to hear from you. So thank you so much. Thank you, Kelly, too, for doing such a great job.
We're gonna see if William says he might have his microphone working. So let's just give that a try. William, do you want to give it another try? Ah, darn it. All right, we'll figure the technology out for tomorrow then. It'll be great to hear from William if he can navigate those mysteries. So, all right, well, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, everyone. It's lovely, as everyone has expressed, like lovely to see you. You all matter deeply to me for sure, and I think that sentiment is absolutely universally shared, right? So we're blessed to have such interesting lives and blessed to have had time in Korea and connections to each other. And yeah, we'll talk with you more tomorrow if you can all make it. All right. Bye.
Bye.